good afternoon, class. My name is Chelsea Bartlett, and I decided to do something different this week for my post. I am an auditory learner, so I wanted to share that with you guys to kind of engage you in a different way. So, our question that we're talking about this week is, how do we reach students who are different than we are, who have a different worldview than we have? I've kind of changed the question a little bit because I read The Dream Keepers. It's a profile of some successful teachers of African American students. So mainstream culture that we will encounter in most of our schools are white middle class. White middle class students are considered the mainstream American culture here. But how do we reach those students that don't identify with that culture? African American students, American Indian students, maybe even Asian students. America, we're the melting pot, so we have a ton of diversity, even students who have disabilities. How do we reach those students? Because they have a drastically different worldview than most of us have. So here, our book centers on this idea of cultural relevance. So to reach students who are ethnically and culturally different from us, we have to be culturally relevant. Central to this idea is the concept of finding ways to legitimize students who have a culture that is different than the mainstream. How do we take that culture and how do we give it value in our classroom, in our content areas, in the activities that we are assigning our students, in the curriculum that we expose them to? Do we give value to their culture or do we not? These are all wrapped up in this idea of being culturally relevant. For my 3 interesting facts, I want to profile in the book 2 different types of teachers: the culturally relevant teacher and the assimilationist teacher. The author does a great job of kind of weaving these 2 threads to show kind of ideas of what a good teacher, a teacher who reaches, in this instance, African American students, but a teacher who reaches kids who are ethnically and culturally different than the mainstream. So number 1, the culturally relevant teacher will see teaching as an art. The assimilationist teacher views teaching as technical. So these are the two types of people who view teaching as an art and teaching as a science with the procedure. So where do you line up on this chart? Do you view teaching as an art? Is it something creative that changes from classroom to classroom? Or is teaching methodical? Are you the kind of teacher who you want to get all your lesson plans done and those are going to be the same for years to come, where you're kind of comfortable? Or is teaching an art? Is it ever changing? Is there beauty in it? For number 2, this was where I was challenged the most. The author says that culturally relevant teachers who reach kids who have different worldviews than they do, help the pupil connect all of their identities. So we all know we have different identities, right? We have our local identity, our family identities. We're all daughters, sons, wives, mothers, friends, teachers. All these are different identities. And our culturally relevant teacher helps our students connect all of those identities. How do they all fit together into your whole person? So our culturally relevant teacher connects the community, the national, the global, all of those different identities in our students. Whereas our assimilationist teacher wants to homogenize students into one American identity. The example the author gives in the book is of a teacher. When you ask teachers, how do you view your classroom in terms of diversity? The teacher will say, oh, I don't see color, I just see students. I just see minds to teach. Okay? And if you had asked me that question before I read this book, I would have said something along those lines. I don't see color, I don't see race, ethnicity, I just see students it's my job to educate. And our author makes a point that might not be the best kind of method for teaching our students, that culture is something so much more that should be celebrated and should be used to our advantage in the classroom. And number 3, culturally relevant teachers pull out knowledge from students, whereas our assimilationist teachers, they put in knowledge. So this is the age-old comparison between a teacher who is more, what's the word? constructivist. So this is a constructivist teacher, and this would be a teacher who views their job as more transmission. So I'm going to stand and lecture to you. So I'm going to give my students their new knowledge. It's up to them to do with whatever I give them. Whereas a culturally relevant teacher pulls out knowledge like a miner, goes into a mine and mines out that also. So these are our differences between the two types of teachers. One being a culturally relevant teacher, a teacher who reaches kids who are ethnically and culturally different, who are not the mainstream. So, my question that I want to leave you with for this week is, where do you see yourself on this chart? Are you a culturally relevant teacher? Or are you more of an assimilationist? I don't want to make an argument that either way is better. I just want to know, where do you identify with? What type of teacher do you want to be? Do you want to be a culturally relevant teacher? Or do you want to be an assimilationist teacher? Where is your teaching philosophy at? And how, in areas where you are deficit, where you aren't where you want to be, what are some concrete steps that you can resource yourself with, can equip, and how can you learn to be that kind of teacher that you want to be? So thank you guys for listening. I appreciate your attention. I look forward to your responses. Thanks.